but it's 11:01, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Holly Ittel. I'm the Quilt National and Exhibitions Director at the Dairy Barn Art Center. I am joining you from my sister's house. I'm back home visiting family, and her house is the one with the best Wi-Fi. So anyway, it's so good to have you all here. Quilt National is open at the Dairy Barn until Labor Day, which is July 6th. I'm sorry, September 6th. Sorry about that. And we're here with 4 wonderful artists, Betty Busby, Valerie Goodwin, Jeanne Marklin, and Isabelle Wiessler. Thanks all for being here. If the 4 of you would like to each go around and introduce yourself first, that'd be great. Betty, do you want to go first?
Oh, thanks. I'm Betty Busby. I live in the high desert in New Mexico, and I turned to fiber after almost 20 years as a ceramic person. And fiber is more colorful, lighter, less dusty, and easier on my knees. So I'm very grateful to be able to do this full time. And I am very happy to be in the show and to be with these other wonderful artists. Thanks.
Jeanne, how about you go next?
Sure. I'm Jeanne Marklin. I live in Williamstown in Massachusetts. It's the very northwest corner of Massachusetts in a rural area, which I've been really enjoying for the last 14 years I've lived here. I was a photojournalist, and I've been a clinical social worker, and I've been an art quilter for about 20 years now. And I'm thrilled to be in Quilt National. It's my first time. And it's been a real energizer, especially after the pandemic, to have my piece in the show.
Oh, well, we're happy to have you, Jeanne. Valerie?
Yes, good morning. I'm Valerie Goodwin. I live in Tallahassee, Florida. I recently retired from teaching architecture after doing that for over 28 years. And I came to be an art quilter through studying architecture, which was kind of an interesting journey for me. This is my second time being in Quilt National, and I'm so excited and so pleased to be part of it. And I look forward to telling you guys a little bit more.
Thanks. And Isabelle?
Yeah, okay. I'm Isabelle Wiessler. I'm living in the southwest of Germany, very near the Black Forest. I show you a picture from where I live, so you will see. So, but I'm actually French, and I'm living in Germany since 40 years now. Because I have to say that, because I met a German boy in Disneyland in California as I was living there. So just for you to know how the things goes. Yeah, I've been making quilts since I think 30 years about, but I'm a full-time artist since 8 or 9 years, which I really, really enjoy. I just did quit my job and say, well, that's what I'm going to do now. I'm teaching a lot to get the money to come, but I really love to work with it as an artist and as a teacher. And well, yeah, that's what I'm doing most in Europe.
Great, thank you. Thanks for all joining us. I'm gonna pause this slideshow so we can land on just one image. So if each of you would like to speak about your piece in Quilt National and the work you're creating now, yourself, anything you'd like to tell us, you'll each have about 10 minutes to do so. And you don't have to use the whole time, and you can go over if you want. So we'll go in alphabetical order. Betty, do you want to start? Unless you don't want to go first.
Oh, thanks. Thanks again. And sadly, I don't have that much to say about this piece because it isn't representational at all. It's just a design. I have been playing with circles for years, and this basically is what happens when you put a lot of circles together and squish them and stretch them and give them direction by giving them pointy lines. And it kind of became thought of as a pandemic quilt, but is actually a little bit pre-pandemic. So I work very improvisationally. The back of it is a piece of beautiful silk jacquard that I dyed. If I am, if I want a lot of rich color on a large area, I will use dye rather than paint. I think it gives more depth to the piece. And then after I make my background, I put it up on the wall, and I love having a frame to work on, and I start making these shapes and I move them around on the background till they look good. These shapes were made on my electric cutter. I drew the design on my iPad and fed it into my electric cutter, and they're quite large. They're basically 22 inches wide a piece or so. So they are made in 2 halves and then joined together on the quilt to make one larger image. I'm using non-woven materials. Here, look, I have show and tell. So this is one. The reason that I use the non-woven materials is because I can get much finer details than I can than if I'm cutting fabric. If you tried to cut this out of the fabric, it might even pull apart because the lines are so fine. However, I just keep the non-woven cutouts basically to a minimum to give a line to the design, and then the rest of it shows off the fabric. So the only fusible that's on here is on the non-woven material, and you can see the background showing through some of them, and then some others I put contrasting fabric in the background, like the green one and the blue one kind of in the center, just to keep the motion going. The extended lines that come out from each piece were added later. The designs were cut with the, without the lines. And then after I positioned them on the background material, I added the lines in to where they interacted with each other in a nice balance. And again, with the improvisation, when I'm thinking of my composition, I'm thinking of lights and darks, and I am thinking of cool and warm. So when I chose the colors for the shapes, I chose contrasting colors, but they were mostly cool colors with the addition of the yellow, which is kind of in between, because that gives me a nice bridge between the greens and the blues. So I painted the non-woven just with regular acrylic paint. I love doing that because it's so thin that you can use regular artist acrylic paint with its huge range of colors and still have a lot of sewability. It doesn't make it thick and stiff the way it would with fabric, because there isn't, the non-woven is so thin that it doesn't absorb as much paint. So, and then you have a tremendous range of colors to choose from. And all the stitching is just on the non-woven material. There is no stitching in the background. Long ago, I decided that I was just going to, I think stitching is incredibly important, but I decided to just stitch the areas that need stitching and not worry about the rest. And that way the silk can just hang out and billow through. You need to keep in mind that areas that are not stitched will puff out a little bit, which I like, but I do have in the back of my mind a design where I don't have large areas that are unstitched. So I can, you know, stick a straight line through them, or, you know, arrange the shapes. So I have, you know, kind of rhythmic spaces that are not quilted in addition to the spaces that are quilted. The cutter can cut pretty much any kind of detail that you want. I am really limited by what I can sew, because I do want to sew it all down for strength. And it's hard to aim because I want to get the stitching right around each shape. So that is challenging. And I actually redrew this design after I've made several smaller ones before this, but you see the kind of H shape in the center of each one. I kind of redrew the design to give myself a little bit of extra space in the middle where I could put the stitches where I wasn't going crazy with those tiny circles. I have a track mounted sewing machine, and it isn't a real long arm because it's a stretched out commercial Singer sewing machine. And the reason that I bring that up is it does not have the visibility that a real long arm does. It does not have a dedicated hopping foot that comes down where you can see where you're going. I have a regular darning foot on it, which you would put on any sit down machine. So I'm limited in my stitching to, you know, designs where I can just kind of go around the center and I don't have to place the thread exactly. I think that's all, unless anybody has any other questions.
Yeah, a couple questions that came up were, one person says they've never heard of an electric cutter. What brand is it?
Actually, they're very, very, very common now. They started off years ago to make topo maps, and maybe you've seen pictures of them making topo maps with the two metal bars and the pencil, and they're moving around on a piece of paper and drawing the lines. Mm-hmm. It's called a plotter, and they've been around for years. Sign makers have used them for years and years. Those are the machines that they use to make signs, for instance, in your gallery, when you have the vinyl letters that are on the mm-hmm. wall that you peel off and stick on the wall. Sign makers use those. And they were maybe 12 years ago or so. I've been using them for maybe 8 years or 10 years. But 12 years ago, one of the craft companies decided to market them to home hobbyists. And they were directed toward people that were scrapbooking. So they wanted to monetize it by making your own creation of your own designs very inconvenient. They wanted to sell you their designs to cut out. So you could buy a happy birthday text, and you could buy, mm-hmm. you know, fold together boxes for your parties. But so when the Cameo, this machine that I use is called a Cameo Silhouette, and it comes with the software, you know, that's free, that you put into your computer. And it's very easy to transfer your own designs into the software and create specially for this machine to cut. And that's why I use this one. So again, it's a Cameo Silhouette machine, and it can cut a 12-inch wide piece of material by actually 10 feet long, if you want to go crazy. So that's what I use. It's a drag cutter. It has a very tiny, tiny little blade. It looks like the tip of an X-Acto knife, and it drags it around the material that you have stuck on a cutting mat that comes with it.
And what design program do you use on the iPad?
I use an old one because I know how to use it. I hate learning new software. You can use any drawing program. You could even do it in notes, just so long as it's black and white. You can even, and I started out because I left my iPad in the drawer for about 4 years because I didn't want to learn how to use it. I started out drawing them with Sharpie on a piece of copy paper. And you can do that too and just scan it in. In workshops, we even take pictures with our iPhones and they can send them to me. All of that works. The actual program I use is called Sketches Pro. Everyone is using Procreate now. It's like $1 more and is more current. I think Sketches Pro is not being updated anymore. But again, you can use any program. The only thing that you really need is a black and white image, because when the software looks at your image, it will trace around the edge between the black and the white, and that's where it knows how to cut. So it's taking your raster JPEG file and transforming it into a vector file that will go, will tell the cutter where to cut.
Okay, and then we have a question from Leah. She's asking, what is, excuse me, what is the non-woven material you're using, and did you make
I use a bunch of different kinds. What I teach with and what I recommend is Pellon 830. Now, it's not a interfacing, it's their pattern drafting material. And it's available anywhere. If you're in the United States, the best place to get it is Walmart online. And you can have it brought to your house so no one can see you going in Walmart. But but it's very inexpensive. You can get, well, you used to be able to get a 10-yard bolt for $9.99. So I encourage people to experiment. Rather than being precious with your material, if you have something like this, you can paint it with different paints and cut it out different ways and see how it looks. But it takes, you can put fusible on it just fine. It takes paint very well and doesn't melt, so you can iron it right on your fabric to stitch it down. It needs to be stitched down though. It's not strong enough to hold up on its own, but it's a really good material to start with. Pellon 830.
Nice, thank you.
Sure.
Oh, and they're asking, what kind of paint do you use? Acrylic?
Any kind of paint works. I use normally just regular artist's acrylic paint. You want to look for the consistency of toothpaste, not a thick body paint and not a real thin fabric paint, because the material is so thin that it won't be opaque enough to really show your design. So I just use regular artist acrylic paint. Any kind of fabric paint that's opaque would work too, but not the thin liquidy kinds of fabric paint. Again, here's one of the pieces, has fusible on the back, and you can see it's very thin, very flexible, but it was painted with the just acrylic paint from the hobby store.
Well, neat, thank you.
Absolutely.
I think alphabetically that would make Valerie the next presenter. Let me
All right.
hop in here again. There we go.
Maybe it'd be easier for me to share my screen.
Oh, sure. Okay, let me stop the screen share. Okay, and you can go ahead and share.
And can I annotate? Looks like that's available to me. All right, so this is my diptych, the piece I did for Quilt National, or that is in Quilt National rather. And it's called Corrupt Connections. And At the time, I was very frustrated and very upset with what was going on in our government at the time, given the person who was at the head of our government, whose name shall remain nameless, I suppose, at this point. And I wanted to see how I could express how I felt using the language of maps. And so I work two different ways. Sometimes I work very improvisationally, much like Betty, but sometimes I plan things out much like I was trained to plan things out as an architect. And so this is an example of how I used kind of a really linear, I guess, process in terms of designing this piece. And I started with a map of Washington, D.C. And the red is the mall. And I noticed that there were certain foreign governments that at one point we felt were not the most moral or ethical people to be involved with. They seem to have been embedding their influences into the fabric of the nation's capital in ways that it felt to me like they were fitting in just like they belonged. And so I wanted to express that feeling using the map of DC. And then I found maps of various centers of various governments that I felt were really given undue influences in terms of things that were happening in the United States. And so at the end of the mall, I've got a map of the Kremlin. And I think, so here it is. So this is a map of the Kremlin. And see, I've tried to carefully place it in such a way that it feels like it belongs there. I think the Kremlin is right here. And then because a certain person seemed to spend a lot of time away from DC at his resort in Mar-a-Lago, I've got this offshoot of this map of Mar-a-Lago that kind of shoots out from one of the diagonal lines within the map of the mall. And then here I've got a map of the Palace of Khashoggi. I think I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but that is what this is. I'm not sure if I can zoom in or not, but that's what this green area is. And then I found on the Googles, I found a map that was purported to be Kim Jong-un's escape route. And so that's what this yellow piece is. And so it diagonally kind of connects with Mar-a-Lago. And then to kind of ground the piece, I've got the skyline of Washington, D.C. And so this is a way that I was trained to sort of to tell the story of an architectural design is kind of you collage together different views of a place to kind of tell the story. And that's what I've done here. And I don't know if you can see it right over here. Let's see. Right over here, if you look closely, there is our former president and there is Putin kind of having a nice little intimate conversation. So it's just, the question of having more things to look at, the more you gaze at this piece. My work, I work with technology in somewhat the same way that Betty does. I use what's called a laser cutter, and that's how I'm able to get all these really intricate lines. And I should say, the first I started out with a background that is silk organza that was green, and I wanted to make the kind of the ground look a little bit unsavory, a little bit. I graded out just because that's the way I felt the capital felt like at that point. So that's why there's some colors that I use there. And so I use a laser cutter, and I'm able to download images, map lines from certain websites. And then I can make a file, a vector file that I can send to my laser cutter. And so I'm able to make this lace-like web of map lines. And so these white lines were all cut out. It was one big piece. It was quite a bit of patience takes to kind of disentangle them and remove all the pieces that are in between these lines. And then, so I used, in this case, I used what Betty used. I used Evelyn that had Misty Fuse on the back. So after I cut it, I can just iron it down to the surface. And then in order to keep it there, I use a couching line to couch all those lines in place. Sometimes I use, let's go to the next one. So in this case, I didn't use Evelyn. I used, what did I use? I used sports nylon to cut these lines. So when I was learning to use the laser cutter, we have a big one at my university. It's a 30, it cuts up to 30 by 40 inches worth of area. And I experimented on 30 different types of fabrics, and I discovered which ones cut better. One of them was sports nylon. You can use a tight woven cotton. Of course, you can use Evelyn. And also I found that silk organza cuts pretty well. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is that on some of the street lines, I've got the Muller report. So if you start to look at it a little closer, you can see some of the excerpts from the Muller report. Let's see, maybe it's, I wanted to show you the laser cutter working. Hold on. So this is the laser cutter cutting the map lines. So I've sent it in what's called a vector line, which is really what, it's really what I believe the electric cutter uses as well, as a vector file. And so before I retired, I had access to this machine. And I don't have as much access to it, but I did buy, so this is the big machine at work. So I did buy this machine. It's a Glowforge laser cutter. It is smaller. It cuts, it's about 24 by 12 inches wide. That's the surface area. It cuts, it works well with, the software that you get, Silhouette Cameo machine that Betty described. And so I'm becoming more familiar with sort of how to use that. I also use Illustrator a lot to make the vector files. Oh, I did also want to show you my studio, just real quickly. I made a little video. I just have to find it. And if I'm taking too long, just go ahead and stop me.
No, you're
Holly.
fine.
So this is my studio. It's just 2 bedrooms that were joined when our son went away. And so this is where I am right now as I speak. And I guess if anybody has any questions, I'm willing to answer them.
So Leah is asking, why did you do it in 2 pieces? So why is it a diptych, I believe is the question. Go ahead.
Because it was easier for me to handle.
Mm-hmm.
I have problems with my shoulders, so I have to sort of break my pieces down into smaller parts.
And then what is the price for a laser cutter? Do you know what that one was?
Well, the Glowforge that I just purchased, it's about $3,000. Mm-hmm. The big one that the university had is $30,000, but they're coming down in price.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think we'll see them in more homes, I'm supposing, if they're...
Oh, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. There are all kinds of communities on Facebook, people who use the Glowforge to make, well, I think they use it to make stuff like you would buy at, I don't know. I don't know if you have a Best Buy where you live, but they make, little trinkets with it and they sell them on Etsy or on Amazon. A lot of people use it to cut wood and acrylic and much thicker surfaces, but you can also cut really delicate materials like fabric.
LZ says, I like the two sections. It's sort of a nation divided image.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that,
good point.
Yeah, I think so too. That really adds to the loaded imagery and your intention. I think it's great. So Jeanne, would you like to tell us about your work? And do you want to screen share, or do you want me to go back to the image that I have?
Go back to the image you have.
Oh, wrong way. There we go. Okay.
There we go. So this repeated image on my work is a wound from a tree in Dublin. And it was very striking to me. I was there for a few months. And every day that I passed it, I felt like it was just watching me and, you know, pleading and saying, please do something about the environment. We are burning up, we're being cut down, destroyed, land cleared, all the things that are going on in the environment that are so detrimental to us and trees. And I feel so much that we have a symbiotic relationship with trees. The planet can't live without them, and we can't live without them. So this particular image stayed with me, and I kept trying to figure out what to do with it. I had it printed at Spoonflower. I made small things, I think, for the auction. And I made another quilt that I wasn't really happy with, but eventually, whenever I'm thinking, okay, design-wise, what's an easy answer? And an easy answer is repetition. And I like a lot of repetitive work. I shouldn't say repetitive work that use repetition. And I particularly like these colors. So I finally learned how to use my printer in a way that I could do the repetition without pulling my hair out, and printed the same image on fabric that I have dyed myself. I've been dyeing for a long time. And so I have lots of fabric. And I printed it out. I fused it and quilted it. The border is a commercial batik, and it was meant to sort of reflect like bark or, you know, a natural element. I think the only other thing I'd say is I have been collecting tree wounds since then. That's been about 11 years. And I try to look for ones that do call to you, that make you see the tree as an individual. And tree wounds also remind me of the wounds that we all have. We all have wounds and scars, and very often people don't know that, and they don't take into consideration that all people are wounded in some way. Life can be very tough. And so it feels like it's a really representative of a universal idea.
So Katie is asking, how did you get the lighter areas in each background? Is this a black and white image printed on different colors of fabric?
Yes, this was an image that I, because it's of a tree, and a tree is round, the lighter image is kind of where the curve of the tree trunk was. It was, yeah, I mean, it was a color image, but I turned it into essentially just black and white. And then it took on whatever the color of the fabric was.
And then my image here can't show any of the stitching. I didn't put a high enough resolution image in. Could you talk about how this is quilted or what stitching you used in it?
I use a Bernina Q20, and I stitched, can you see my arrow?
No.
No, okay. Because it's not shared screen, that's why. I stitch mostly in the way of the going up and down as bark would, and then around the wound itself. And there are some places where in like the lower right of the wound image, they are, there's some leaves just to help people see, oh yes, this is a tree. This is not a human eye.
Nice. So you made a series out of this image, correct?
I'm planning on making a series out of it. I had, like I said, done some smaller ones. But after I finished this, that Epson printer collapsed. It just died. And no matter what I did, I couldn't fix it. So I just bought a new one. It had taken a while with the shortages that we've had, you know, to find them in stock anywhere. So I did buy a new one, and I do plan on doing more in this series. I did do a video of my studio. Is this the time to show that?
Yeah, sure. Let me stop my screen share and you can share yours.
This is my studio.
Oh, can you screen share?
Oh, you weren't seeing that? This is my Bernina
Okay.
Quilter's Edition. Hold on a sec. Can you see that now?
Not yet. Do you see the screen?
Holly, can you see that?
No. Do you see the screen share option down at the bottom probably?
Ah, okay.
There we go. Now we see it.
And I have lots of those plastic drawers for, mostly I have paints and stamping things and stuff like that in there. I'm lucky to have a storage area up top in this little bit of a loft area. A plastic thing with the cover on it is a serger that I have not learned to use yet, but it's there waiting for me. My computer and office area and color printer that I used to print out images on fabric. I didn't use that one for my Quilt National piece. That one died. So that's a new one. The piece on the wall is called Burning Up, and I did that in 2020. Heating and air conditioning, everybody needs it.
I don't have one.
And my fabric storage.
Nice, thank you. Jean, we have a couple questions. Well, Marianne first says, perfectly aligned pieces, wow. And then she asks, did you use prepared printer-friendly fabrics and how did you print on them?
No, I didn't. I used just my hand-dyed fabrics and I ironed them onto freezer paper, or some of them, I use the labels that you can buy that are, I think they're called full sheet labels or something. And you can use those at least 5 times usually. And you just rub the fabric onto it and then it very easily goes through the printer.
Nice. And that's just a, sorry, what kind of printer is it, I guess?
Epson, I've had Epson printers. They use, well, not all of them. I had to do a lot of research this time to find which ones used pigment ink rather than dye. And a word of caution out there for anyone who's thinking of getting them. The new ones that look great because you can just fill them up. You don't have to use cartridges. The black is pigment, the other colors are dye. So I found a list on the Red River, I think it's just called redriver.com. It's a paper company, but they had a list of printers that use pigment ink. So Google that and you'll get a list. It took me a while to find that. And then I had to do the research on the different machines. But I got a new one and I haven't really used it yet. It's been another one of those learning things, so I'll get to it.
So other than the, so you put the fabric on the freezer paper or the adhesive paper, right? Is there any other material that you have to put on the fabric?
No.
Okay, and then why is the dye bad?
Well, really, dye isn't bad. The thing is, the pigment is a long-term, it has the stability and more of protection against light affecting it. It also, if it's dye and if it gets wet, it can run. It may not be fixed. So the pigment is fixed when it comes out. I always iron it for just in case, but that's my understanding. That's what I've always used.
And I'm sorry, tell me one more time, what is the paper backing you use? I'm gonna type it in here.
Well, I either use freezer paper. I'm not sure if everyone is, if it's called that in all countries, but essentially the top part is just paper, and on the bottom it's almost like there's wax on it, and when you iron it onto the fabric it sticks.
Okay, great, thank you. Isabelle, do you want me to screen share your image or do you want to screen share?
Yeah, could you first screen share the image and then after I will try to screen share, I tell you. Okay. Oh, it will come, no problem. Okay, first of all, I had forgot to say that I was really, really, really very thrilled to be in Quilt National 21. Once again, I was 19 for the first time, Quilt National 19, and then again. So I really want to say that because it was for me really something wonderful. And I'm very, very sad that I couldn't come to the opening, and I will not be able to come in September either. I don't think this is going to work, as only American citizens are allowed to come to fly. Okay, I just wanted to say that first. Well, so now I'm going to talk about my piece. I found out that what I wrote in the catalog was very quite well, what the best I could do with English words. So if you don't mind, I will, because I'm not sure everybody has the catalog, I will first read this. I'm sorry I have to read, but
sure,
English is not my language, and I think that wouldn't be too bad. And then after I can say a little more about it. The lockdown due to COVID-19 affect me just as most artists, I guess. I suddenly had plenty of time as exhibitions and teaching opportunities were canceled. The free time that all of a sudden appeared in front of me didn't lead to any thoughtful artistic work. The fear of what happened and that we couldn't manage was entering my mind and body. As time went by, I could see an end of the lockdown and new normality. Images came to me again, colorful image of seeing through to the end and hope. That is what I expressed in this work. So this is what I mean. This is why I made those holes and why I mean, it is an artistic way of seeing this. And but this is really how I felt, that there was hope in the end. Well, we know now, 1 year later, that it wasn't all, but I think it is sometimes better when you don't know what is going to happen. So I think we're not done with this, but well, this did lead to me to this piece. And I would say this is quite an uncommon work for me. It's the first big work I did in 3D, like, you know, not like, and I am working with other materials than cotton fabric, but it is the first time I did such a big work with this. I call myself mixed media artist because I'm not only using cotton fabric. The way I'm working is that I always make sketches of what I'm doing. I think we could you share the screen, then I can show you maybe how it started.
You want to share your screen?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Now I can? Okay, yeah, I hope this is going to work. Okay, it's not the right one. Oh. Okay. Where is it? Where are you? Yes, here.
There, the top.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. So this is the sketch I did for this piece, and it is quite difficult. I usually work from photographies, and this time it was really something abstract that really came out of my mind. I don't know why, but that's how it happened. And yeah, and that was the sketch. So you see, it's really a small sketch, but it gave me a very good idea about composition, about the size, about the composition, and about the colors. And this is really usually the way I work. I'm never working, you know, just working. That it's not usually not possible the way I'm working. And those are all cylinders, so they are all pieces of. Wait, I have to start again. It doesn't work. Oh, I'm sorry. Second one. So they were all as big as this. They were all, wait a second, 25 out of 60 inches. And all those pieces had a color that was getting from one to the other one. So I painted Lutradur and Bounderweb. We have a Bounderweb in Europe that really gets wonderful when you paint it. And I added a chiffon scarf, and I ironed all this all together. And I can show you, I didn't make that many photos about what I have been doing, but you can see more details in the center, on the center part. So you can see that it is adding all those 3 layers that makes the structure more interesting. And in the middle, I only made holes with a soldering iron. I don't have all those fancy things you all have. I'm really, whoa, but that's the way I'm working. And yeah, this is more oh, I can never say that word.
Intuitive?
Intuitively, something like this. Well, okay, never mind. And but you can see the stitches, and you can see how it goes. So that is more in the middle, where I only worked with soldering iron. And I will show you one more photo. Yeah, this is when I'm working with a heat gun. So you see, I have to pin it on corkboard. That's the way I do it, and work with the soldering, with the heat gun, which I did more and more for the pieces that went on each side. And I think we can see one more photo. Yeah. So you can see a little bit what happened in that's. I didn't think about making that many photos when I was working. Yes, it's always acrylic paint. So I'm painting with acrylic paint. Maybe I can show you. I have those. So I'm working with L'Outradour. This is L'Outradour. You can see it's also a non-woven material. And this one is quite thick, and I needed it to make, to make those cylinders to hold. And this is the painted Bandeway, the German painted Bandeway. I love this very interesting paint, how the paint goes. And when you iron this on the painted L'Outradour, and then this, and then you go with a chiffon scarf like this. Yeah, and then I iron it. But I can tell you, I can show you how big is my studio. I couldn't do it in my studio because the pieces were too big, and had to use my whole apartment, which is not possible to do in the winter because it doesn't dry quick enough. But that's why. But we had a nice spring last year, or well, I did it in May, June. So I can show you my studio if you want it. Well, first of all, this is the view I have from my apartment. So it's much different than what you have. And now my studio, yeah, this is one size. I have a lot of threads. It's all thread because I'm doing a lot of stitching too. You see my machine, that's what I'm using to do all the work I'm doing. So I don't have any long arm, and I don't have any other machine. I have a Bernina, 20 years old Bernina, and it's not very easy, I can tell you, because it's small, but it's working. So I think it's I think good to know for some of you that says, well, I cannot do all this because I don't have the equipment. I think it works. It works. You just have to work on it. And I have another from the other side. Where are you? Yeah. And that's from the other side. So you see, I don't have any, how do you call that? What you all have where you can pin everything, because as you see, thank you. Because I'm living under the roof, but I have a friend who did one for me when I paint, because usually I'm doing a lot of what I call painted quilt, like the one I had at Quilt National 19, or the one that is behind me. And I really, really need to paint it in front of me. So I have something that that is behind my bed and I hold it out when I'm doing this. So, well, it works. But I must say, I have seen, Michael, you're here. I saw you're here, and I saw your studio, and I was a little bit jealous. It's so big, and it's, but that's the way it is. We have to get along with what we have. Okay, so I think there were some questions as I was talking.
Yeah, did you see the questions, or do you want me to read them?
No, because I couldn't speak and read.
So Kit is asking, how are the tubes braced? The 13 tubes that make up the...
How do they hold? Yeah, so I did them as tubes, and then I stitch by hand behind just to get them that they hold. And then I added at one, I add a little bit of Lutradur behind just so you could put
a rod.
Yeah, rod, whatever. It's not difficult because they are so light. They are so light. It was, as I had to send it, that was my biggest problem. How am I going to send this huge thing? And I went to my tea store because I knew, she always gets very big boxes from China and India, and she exactly had the right box for me. But it was so light. And as I don't know who it was, DHL or UPS who went to pick this up, he sees this huge box and it's not heavy. He couldn't believe it. Well, thank you, Peggy. Yeah.
And so the order of the layers is the Lutradur underneath, and then
it's Lutradur, and then Flisofix. Flisofix is the German name. So Wander Under, both painted, and I use those chiffon scarf on top. And I run all this, and then I stitch, make the holes, and by some of them I use the heat gun, and I used more and more heat gun, not in the 3 in the middle, but then I started to use it it was also, I thought it was making it much more interesting to get this thing through, not only with the holes of the soldering iron, but also through this, what was happening with the heat gun. But I've been using this quite a lot already, but never for such a big piece of work. This is something I work quite a lot with. I've been working on the theme of tree barks and trees, and I've been using it a lot for this. Because it's such gives such an interesting texture. That's the point. Yeah.
I think it's so interesting how these artist talks have come together. The artists were given the opportunity to sign up on each day, so you could see who signed up before you, and it seems like each week there's a very nice complement and contrast of the styles that people are working in. And so for you and Jeanne to both be working in trees, and Valerie and Betty to be doing these cut pieces, using technology in similar ways, it's very interesting how these are coming.
Yeah, I'm absolutely not in technology. As you see, I really work with my hands, and from the beginning with the sketches and the heat. I need that. I used to paint when I was younger, and I don't know. I mean, I love it. I love how you use technology. I think it's great, but I have no idea how.
Well, that leads me to a question for Valerie, actually. I see a lot of architects that are quilters. What do you think attracts architects into quilting and quilt making? Oh, you're muted. Oh, Valerie, you're muted.
When I first began, I didn't know of many. And when I first began, there was a little bit of trepidation because I felt like my colleagues would think less of me because they felt like quilting was kind of rooted in domestic work.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get over that pretty quickly. But I do see a lot of women and men, to a certain extent, getting involved in quilting, kind of taking that challenge on. And I think it's because you have more control over what you do. You know, if you're in architecture, you have to deal with codes and contractors and the client, and you're several steps removed from the actual product. You have to do drawings to have somebody else do it. But with quilting, it is very hands-on, and you do get to touch the material, and you do get to kind of have a direct relationship with it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Betty, a similar, well, not quite similar question, but I do have a question for you about your past of working in clay. How do you feel about the transition from such a time-sensitive material of working with clay to now working in fabric and fiber?
Well, that's a really good question. And there is really a lot of carryover. When I was fixing to turn 60, which was a couple years ago, I decided that 60 was going to be the new 20, and I'm going backwards. So I have started doing 3D stuff, which is, you started out really as revisiting some of the shapes that I made in ceramics, even learned in school. And it also informs my productivity. When I started the ceramic tile manufacturing facility, I was in my very early 20s. I had a $30,000 monthly nut to cover. So to me, not making something is kind of like a shark. When it stops swimming, it's going to sink to the bottom and die. So I am, I'm always making something. I'm always experimenting with new techniques and materials. When we made our factory, we were self-funded, and some of the commercial tile making machines were $50,000 and stuff. So I had to invent the kilns, I had to invent the glazes, and I had to invent the kiln furniture to put the tiles on. So, and that's why I use a Singer sewing machine instead of a quilting machine that costs more than my car. I have severe envy, but, Isabelle was talking, I spent many, many hours behind a soldering iron, and still do. I still use it, but it gives a different quality of cut. And when I go into the technology thing, it's to make my own designs, and also it's to do it if it can be done better than I can do it by hand, that's when I'll use it. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of carryover. And one of the things that attracted me to ceramics in the first place in school was the surprise every time you open the kiln. And if you've ever done ceramics, it looks nothing like it's going to when you put it in the kiln. It looks nothing like when it comes out. It's always a total surprise. So that's when a lot of my painting and dyeing is kind of with that aesthetic. I want to be surprised. I want the paint, I want the dye to do its own thing. I'm always experimenting with different combinations of paint and stuff. So you probably didn't want that long of an answer, but no, there it is. Yeah, it informs what I do all the time.
Yeah, my undergraduate degree is also in ceramics. And so, yeah, I never learned to embrace the surprise of opening a kiln.
Well, and with that was a restrictive thing with making tiles for people, because they're like, oh, we didn't know it's going to be like that. Well, variation. but yeah, you know, and that's dealing with customers. So can I ask one question of Isabelle? So Isabelle, am I to understand you met your husband at Disneyland in California?
Yeah, I met my first boyfriend after, and he was from Hamburg, from Germany, and I was 17. I was there for high school year. I was living in Orange, and he was living in Garden Grove. So we were both very, very close from Disneyland. That's how it happened. And we were in the queue. And I guess if I went in that queue 1 minute later, I would be somewhere totally different. Isn't that crazy?
That is a great story.
But after there were some more German men in my life. He was not the only one. But I still stick here. It's not that bad. I'm living very near the French border, so I cannot complain.
It looks beautiful.
Yeah, it's not too bad. And very close to the French border, so I can get my cheese and my wine and everything I love there.
So can you still find the old French linens? I know, and there's some people that work with the old linens and dye them and hand stitch them.
With the what?
Like the French linens, the old ones.
The French lace.
No, linens, like bed linens. Old ones.
Oh,
and Warringer uses those all the time. Do you know her?
Who uses it?
Anne Warringer, she's in Paris.
Anne Warringer, yes, Anne Warringer, yes, she does. I used to, the first quilts I did painted, I only use all those old linen. No, I don't have any anymore. I keep on asking, but yes, you can. We do.
I'm thinking they may be disappearing because they're very beautiful.
Yeah. But you're right that some artists are using more than other ones. Yeah. And there is also the boutique. Boutique is in very old French work. I don't know if you heard about that. Yeah.
Yes. Anne told me about it and I couldn't remember. And
well, I can do it, but I tell you, I will never make. I was thinking about doing something abstract with it, but it takes you so long. This is not going to work. So, like, it takes you like 4, 5, 6 hours to do this. No. Yeah.
So Jeanne, I'm curious about your past as a photojournalist. And I know you're clearly using your photography skills in your quilt making now. Are you still making photographs, and how does that, your past as a photojournalist, influence what you're making now in your studio?
Well, my undergraduate degree was in communications. It was visual communications, film, video, and photography. And what I loved about being a photojournalist, and I did it in DC, was that every day I had to create a photo to make it into the papers or make my clients happy. And I really enjoyed that process. I kept making photos. I went to get a degree in social work when we started our family. And I just realized we had moved from DC to New York. And I just thought, I can't start with these kids with having completely unscheduled days. You know, it's pretty hard to get daycare for that too. So then I went and I was a clinical social worker. And I think that influences me too, because it's sort of the empathy you need to be a therapist also helps as an artist. And I've been saying for probably 10 years, I feel like I can make a photo of whatever I want. Why am I trying to always create the wheel you know, even though most of my work is abstract, but I wanted to use my photos on fabric. And so I'm doing more of that. I have a piece that will be in at Houston that is just my photos. That one was printed by Spoonflower. And I plan on doing a lot more with the tree wounds because I have at least 100 images now of different tree wounds from all over, from where I live to wherever we've traveled.
Nice. And for those of you who teach, could you talk about how teaching does it influence your art when you get back to the studio? Does it, you know, what is your response after a good class?
Who wants to answer?
Go ahead, Isabelle.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it does. It does. I must say it really, you have to, when you're teaching, you have a different focus on because of what you're teaching, and it forces me to be a little more focused on because of the teaching, on what I'm doing, why am I doing it, maybe more about the techniques, that it really has to be the right technique. And you know, you cannot just say anything and well, we'll see what happens. And so I think this helps me for my work on techniques. And I must say also, when I see what students are doing, or for example which colors they are using, I don't know, I think most of us like to use, you know, they have their favorite color and they are, you know, on their comfort zone because always using. And when I see what some students, the combination of colors they're using, sometimes it really gives me new ideas. I really love it. And also talking to them, it really helps me going further on. But what I realized is it is good not to teach too much for me. If I'm too much on the road, too much teaching, you know, you give a lot from yourself and you don't have enough time to recover from this. But it looks like you're always doing the same. Well, you're not, because every student, all the students are different. And that's also what I realized because of the lockdown. I started to give online classes last autumn, starting November. So it was totally different way of teaching. So I had to review everything. And there are classes, I said, I will not give those classes online because I really have to feel what they're doing. And even though people want me to teach how to paint on a quilted surface, I won't do it because I have to see and feel what they're doing. But on the other hand, this is also a different way of teaching. So you have to think over how you show this, because you are not next to each other. It's really different, but it always gives me a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Valerie, what about you? You taught for 20.
Oh yeah. I now that I'm retired, I look back and I realize how much I missed all the student interaction, all the prep work I used to have to do. And you know, when you develop a project for your students, there's a lot of design thinking that you have to go through. It's like, it's a design problem. And so I think when I taught, that taught me how to think about my work. And all the interaction I had with all my students, particularly my thesis students, and some of the things that they were interested in seeing how they could make connections with has affected my work immensely. And so that's the architecture student side, but the textile student interaction is interesting too. It's taught me how to you know, how to really think about how to present the work, how it affects my work. Students want to know a little bit more about how you work, and you have to think about how you can present that to students. I do miss in-person interaction. I have done a lot of lectures actually so far, and some virtual teaching. And so that's good, but I really look forward to being able to get back out into the world and interact with fiber art students.
Yeah. And Betty, do you want to respond to that question?
I'm coming to see you, Sandy. Are you in the class? Sandy, are you?
Yes, I'm in the class.
Star, she's a star. Anyway, I love my students. I love my venues. I love being in class, but anyone that teaches will tell you that, you know, preparation is 75% of the work. And one thing I learned in the last year is that I love staying home. I have, you know, I've been able to get plants because having to jump on a plane every other week, you know, my sister murdered all my plants while I was gone. So I can hang out with the pets, and it's great. So I have a pretty full schedule next year, but after that, I'm really, really winding down. So I will probably continue to do things like that I can drive to that are around here. But as far as packing up giant amounts of material and flying places, I think I'm done.
Yeah. Betty, I have a kind of a silly question for you. I have a friend. I have a friend who's afraid, like really grossed out by little holes that are repeated. I think it's called trypophobia.
Oh, that's interesting.
And has anyone ever commented on your piece of those repeated little holes?
No.
I've never heard anyone in the gallery say that either, but
did you tell your friend that there's medication for that?
I'll let her know.
I know that somebody asked for detail shots of the thing. I can show you them real quick.
Yeah, sure.
There's one. Share. So there's one. You can see that I have, you know, stitched along the lines. And remember, I told you I left that fat area for my needle to take a rest while I'm cruising around. Here's a little boo-boo, a little extra piece of non-woven cut in there. You can see that I put the contrasting fabric here. It is an innocent piece of batik that I overpainted a little bit with white in the center to get a little bit more depth, but that's where I use my stash of batiks. You can see that I'm a crappy aimer. You can see I slipped off in a few places, but this is another reason that I use the non-woven is I don't have to stitch along the very edge of the material. And I'm not gonna have to worry about any threads unraveling or anything. I'm not much of a raw edge person. If I do raw edge, I will actually brush it with a wire brush and really make those fringes stand out. But I can just stitch down the center of this non-woven stuff and have it stitched down and not have to worry about unraveling. So that is, sorry if it makes people phobic, but Lisa's not spiders or anything.
Hey, it's good to have people have a strong reaction to your artwork, right?
Oh, sure.
Do the four of you have any questions for each other?
Well, the question I had already answered, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, there is another connection, if I could point it out and be bossy and obnoxious. But the parent company that makes Lutrador and Helen and Evelyn, which Valerie is using, is Freudenberg, which is based in Germany. So we're all connected with our materials. I know Isabelle said, well, I'm not using cotton. Well, a lot of us aren't using cotton. But
oh, great. What do you mean you're using the one from Freudenberg?
Of course.
How do you call it? Yeah, but you know, we cannot buy it. They don't sell it in small amounts anymore in Europe. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
You have to buy like 1,000 meters.
Yeah.
It's a little bit crazy, but you can buy it in the US. That's really interesting.
Well, if you come visit, I will sneak you some in your suitcase.
Okay, okay.
Are there more questions from the attendees? Do you have any more questions? Please drop them into the chat box. I'm going through my notes. Isabelle, I know you can't speak for all of Europe, but I'm curious what you would say is the impression or the growing, would you say that you see a growing influence of fiber art and quilt making in Europe and in Germany where you are?
Well, what I will say it until COVID started, because I have no idea what is going on now. We have everything, but I can say there is a really very growing quilt art or whatever fiber art. It is very important, and when you see how many great artists we have in Germany, in Switzerland, I think there are two Swiss artists at Quilt National. They're always Swiss artists, and it's a small country. When you realize how small those countries are, a lot of brilliant British artists too, and from Netherlands, great artists in Netherlands. But what is interesting is that a lot of them are coming from another, not from quilting. Like in England, a lot of are coming from embroidery, and in Netherlands, a lot of coming from other fiber. But now in the meantime, you can really see that it is all getting together, as we are not, maybe less than in the States. I don't know that we really. A lot of us are more thinking in using whatever we need to make our art. Yeah. We are not anymore only fabric.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Mm-hmm. If you see, I would say the biggest exhibition we have in Europe is every 3 years. It's the Triennale, which starts always in Germany. And we will have the next one in October. I'm very curious to see what will be exhibiting there. But there are more and more, or less and less, just fabric. So it is, the point is to think, are we talking about quilts or are we talking about textile art? That's the point.
Sure.
And I know people think very differently about this.
Mm-hmm.
I could share a little bit about what I'm working on right now, if
let's hear it.
Time or interest. So if you look behind me, you can see a work that's in process, and so it's a commissioned piece for a museum in the city where I was born, in Florence, Alabama, and it's a cotton museum, and they wanted a piece to tell the story of cotton. And so here is a maquette for that piece. I don't know if you can see it all, but it's going to be a double-sided piece. And it tells the story of the overlap between the Native American Trail of Tears, and then there was actually a slave Trail of Tears that overlapped all. And the purpose of all these movements westward and southward was to make way for the plantation owners, number one, to have the land they needed for cotton, and then the slaves were moved southward to provide the free labor. And so that's the piece that I'm working on right now, and I've got to finish it up first part of September.
I think you were telling me about this piece at the opening of Quilt National. Is it translucent, the piece, the two sides?
Part of it is. So the area between the states, that's translucent. So it is opaque fabric on top of silk organza. And then the part that has the ocean in it, that's all translucent. And so I'm expanding the story to tell the story of the slave ships as they made their journey across to the East Coast of the United States.
Wow, that's a beautiful piece.
Yeah, I must say, I really admire the way, Valerie, the way you are able to tell stories, but in a way that is not too obvious. I don't know how, if you all understand what I mean. And it is perfect. It's just perfect.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's not too obvious, like she said, and it's also digestible for the viewer. You know, I can understand the story while I learn more about the piece. You know, you find new pieces as you look around.
And it's from the heart.
Definitely.
It's
anyway.
It's from the heart.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Does anyone else want to share what you're working on right now? We have just a couple more minutes. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you all for being here. I really enjoyed speaking with each of you and learning more about each of you and your artwork. So someone asked if the previous Friday events were recorded. Yes, they will be uploaded to YouTube. There's one on there right now. They're just such big recordings that I'm having a hard time trimming them down and then getting them uploaded. But they will be there. I promise you all will be able to go back and watch the ones that you missed, or if you want to rewatch one in the past that's already happened. We still have a few more events, and I'm excited. You'll see online that we're going to be announcing a special Friday Q&A for the artists that are in Australia and New Zealand. I'll be talking to them on Friday, August 20th. So I'm excited for that event. It's going to be in the evening for us, but in the morning for them. And so anyway, thank you all for being here. I hope you can go online to quiltnational.org or dairybarn.org/quiltnational, and both the same website, and find, we have a digital exhibition there, and you can sign up for the future events, Friday events, and you can see the artist talks that are on our YouTube page. They're all linked through that website. So thanks for all being here, and we'll see you next Friday.
Well, thank you so much for making this possible. I think you're doing great work. Really. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. I enjoyed it.
Me too. Thanks.
Thank you.